This is the Snodgrass podcast. Thank you guys for joining me today. I have Tommy Newberry on the podcast with me, and Tommy's the founder of the 1% Club. He started that company in 1991, where they work with Christian business owners on how to achieve more in their financial world, also in their family, their faith, and in their health. He's also the head coach at Achieving Optimal, and he loves to help entrepreneurs and their families maximize their God-given potential. He's the author of the 4-8 Principle, The Secret to a Joy-Filled Life. And on this podcast, we really talk about the mind. On everything really starts from the mind. And if you have a rotten life or rotten relationships or a rotten business, and a lot of it can really be dialed back into what are you thinking about? Like, what are you filling your mind with, and how can you change your mind to think more positively, to think about the next year or 10 years of your life, and to plan that out, that everything that we do is planned. And then if we're aware and we plan and we execute, that's really where the fulfilled life comes in. So that's Tommy Newberry. But before I introduce him, I want you guys to go over to irondeep.com. We just got back from the Men's Awakening Retreat in the Rocky Mountains. We're going to be putting on a couple of more next year in 2023, so make sure you guys check it out on our website. We have videos and pictures from this Men's Awakening on irondeep.com. And we're looking for other feedback and ideas on how can we build the Iron Deep community of men. Another option that we're thinking about is building out a soul mate retreat where the men can bring their spouse and we work on their soul and also with their mate. So that's another idea that we have. We're just kind of like brainstorming, and any feedback that you guys have would be appreciated. So right now, I want to introduce you to the guest on today's podcast, Tommy Newberry. What's going on? I have the guest on today's podcast, Mr. Tommy Newberry out of Atlanta, Georgia. What's going on, Tommy?
Brett, how you doing? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, I'm really excited. Number one, because I just love talking with you, and you're an author and you're a coach. And my dad was a high school coach, but you have been coaching people's lives for the last 31 years. So you're like the pioneer of life coaches, 1991.
Yeah, there weren't many people doing it, but my passion for doing it grew out of sports also. Not football. I played football, but I was obsessed to a fault with baseball. So when my baseball career ended, it was going to be either I'm going to go coach baseball or I'm going to figure out some other way to coach people. And then I noticed that there were people so I got into, when I was playing baseball, I got into sports psychology, like ridiculous, in 8th grade, 9th grade. And I loved the ideas and the strategies and the insights on getting control of your thought life as it relates to performing better in sports. And I thought that could translate into the business world. And there was nobody working with people one-on-one really in the area of self-development back in 1991. And there was nobody working with all areas of life. They would give lip service to, and be balanced, at the end of their message, but they weren't really addressing the faith, the marriage, the fitness, and the other holistic elements that make up a full life. And then there was nobody that was working with what I'll metaphorically say are the bronze and silver medal winners. Everything was aimed at a level beneath there, those that were struggling and wanted to be up and comers. So that's what I targeted. People who had already achieved success, who kind of didn't need a coach, number one. And number two, they wanted help in all areas of life. And then number three, I was going to stick with them indefinitely. A handful of my original clients are still with me today.
Wow.
But in general, my clients are with me for 10 or 15 years.
Wow.
So that was the other element versus a motivational speaker coming into town, speaking to 500 people, and then he's in the next town the next day and the next town the next day. That was the model back then. We just decided to build relationships, long-term relationships with our clients, figured if we help them reach their goals, they will stick with us. And that's been the way it's gone by and large.
Yeah, I mean it's amazing. I mean, had some life coaches on my show before, but yeah, a lot of them are newer within the last 5 years. Just to have someone be in the industry for 30 plus years, and some of my heroes, Zig Ziglar, Brian Tracy. I think we mentioned before the show. Tony Robbins, obviously, he's still rocking and rolling. But and I loved what
What's
you
funny
said.
is What's funny, sorry to jump in. I think my first media I ever got was just a good fortune blessing. Zig Ziglar was in town. That's what made me think of it.
Hmm.
And they used to do these success events at a local basketball arena, like a big arena. Like back then, it was the Omni in Atlanta, but it would be where the NBA team plays, and they'd fill it up and they'd sell it for something ridiculous, like $19 a person or something.
Hmm.
So they did a big feature on him, and I guess they were looking for a local version. And I ended up being the one that they highlighted for the local version.
Oh,
And I
that's
think they
awesome.
must have just found me in the yellow pages. Because,
That's
there
awesome.
was no email address, for first 5, 6, 7 years of my
Yeah.
business. I remember easily faxing clients to remind them of their goals. And it was 30 days since the workshop, think about your goals and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it's come a long way.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I love what you said. Even clients, you say you have had clients today that have been with you 10, 15 plus years. And I loved that because, like you said, most of the times the motivational speakers come in and they inspire you, but then they don't stick with you. And you have with your organization. I got into your book, The 4-8 Principle, The Secret to a Joy-Filled Life. And just talk about that real quick. The 4-8 principle, I was trying to what does that mean? Where does that, I mean, there's the 80-20 principle. Like, what is the 4-8? Can you talk to us about
Well,
that a little bit?
yeah, the 4-8 is it stands for a passage in Scripture in the New Testament. The Apostle Paul in Philippians, after a verse that we're kind of in a chapter of a book of the Bible that is the joy, known as the joy book, Philippians. Paul is chained up. He's under guard. He's in prison. And he utters these words, which most people will recognize. He says, finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is lovely, pure, true, gracious, just, if there's any excellence, if there's anything worthy of praise, think on these things. Or in different translations, it's dwell on these things, meditate on these things. Or in the Amplified Version, it's my favorite. It says, fix your mind on these things. And so Paul knew something about human nature and psychology. He was well ahead of his time. He knew we were not automatically positive, but he also knew we were not hopelessly negative.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, our thinking is the common denominator. And what are we to think about? Well, the good things. So in a marriage, for example, a marriage is going to be a mixture of good and bad. Our boss is going to be a mixture of good and bad. Our parents, clients, community, country, it's all going to be a mixture of good and bad. But Paul was saying, okay, where should you put your mental energy? It doesn't mean you don't solve problems or deal with negativity. It's not saying you bury your head in the sand. It's saying, what do you marinate in? What do you soak yourself in? What do you think about the vast majority of the time? And it's very clear. It's the things that are noble, pure, of good rapport, worthy of praise, excellent, and so forth. And so my grandmother introduced me to that verse long before I understood the meaning of it. I was probably 13 or 14. And she gave it to me on a bookmark, and I stuck it in my Bible and probably ignored it for a while, and took that Bible with me to college. And then when I started my coaching practice about 2.5 years getting out of college, it started to resonate with me. And the more clients I worked with, the more I saw how trouble in their life was being caused by violating what I now name the 4-8 principle based on Philippians 4:8. So we feel what we dwell upon. So most people think their feelings reveal the quality of their life, but their feelings, our emotions, reveal the quality of our thinking. And a subtle distinction. But think about a couple that is upset. So if they're upset, they think that means something's wrong with their spouse or their marriage, but most of the time it means something's wrong with their thinking. Same thing about other relationships, parenting, life in general. More often than not, when we feel rotten, it's because our thinking is rotten, not because our life is rotten. But we live in a culture where we have to combat the constant bombardment with follow your feelings.
Yeah.
Or what do you feel like doing? Or it's a common refrain. Well, I didn't feel like it. You know,
Yeah.
we just, that kind of thing. And if you worship your feelings, you get kind of the rewards of that, which is a roller coaster. Sometimes the feelings point you in the right direction. And sometimes the feelings, more often than not, point you in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
But it feels right.
Right.
One last thing on there. I think most people can relate to an experience that felt right, but ended up being wrong. And then also the reverse of that, where it felt wrong and they passed on it, but it would have been the right thing to go forward with because they didn't feel like it. That can be on a micro level, like working out or a kind gesture that they wish they had done, or it could be something significant like a relationship or a career opportunity or starting their own business.
Yeah, definitely. I love that. I mean, your book really just kind of talks a lot about what you're describing right now, just your mental state, and it talks about the mind, and obviously in biblical, so it talks about just renewing your mind, and it talks about that there's like hidden costs to scattered thinking. I know that one of the things that you really dive into is to focus. Like you have this super focus program that you've been focused on, I guess. I'll say the super focus program. And you said that there's hidden costs to kind of scattered thinking. So what do you mean by that? And how do people get out of that trap?
Yeah, and it's in the same realm. I mean, if you go back to Philippians 4:8, one of the things that we have to acknowledge that Paul's telling us to focus on is focus on excellence. So when you're focused on excellence, you're going to produce excellent results. You're going to notice things you need to do to be better. It also says focus on the truth. It doesn't say invent the truth or create the truth. It says focus on what is true. So it's pushing us toward rock solid principles. But then when you go back to excellence and like in your work life, it's easy to get scattered, meaning spread yourself too thin. So let's say you're born with a potential. A is in like a letter grade potential. But then you spread yourself too thin. You take on too many projects simultaneously. You put too many things on your plate. You water down your ability to concentrate and put out the best effort and the best results. So then all of a sudden you look like a B performer, but you were born an A performer. And then it works. Fortunately, all principles do. It works in reverse. So if you were born a B performer, that you had B talent, you can promote yourself through the principle of focus as well. So like for me, I think it was a gift. I'll talk about baseball mainly. I was a B, probably born with B talent, maybe B plus. I'm not sure, somewhere in there. But through my work ethic and my focus, I elevated myself to at least A minus. I've probably done the same thing in my career. It's just a focus. And anytime that I've gotten into trouble or I've hit a plateau, I usually look around and go, doggone it, I'm pursuing 7 significant projects simultaneously. Right. Because I want to make that kind of difference, but it waters me down, not just in a given week or month, but on a daily basis. You know, if you've got more than a small handful of priorities on your daily list, you're scattered.
Yeah.
And so some people, when I start working with them, they've got 13, 14 things on their to-do list for the day, and that's not including things that their spouse may ask them to do, or showing up at the football practice, or doing things with the kids. Those are all kind of business items. So that's the hidden cost, is you get scattered. When you get scattered, you get watered down. When you get watered down, you don't bring your A game to the marketplace.
Yeah, definitely. Which kind of brings me to the next point, because I was actually feeling like this today. I have some projects that I've started, and I was feeling kind of worn down because I was just kind of overwhelmed, right? And you talk about this kind of overwhelming paralysis by analysis, and I use those terms all the time. I'm in the real estate world, and we use people don't get started because they're constantly analyzing the deals or analyzing themselves, and they just get paralyzed. But I'm doing some new things, and I feel like I'm in that boat too, and sometimes I feel just overwhelmed. But you talk about in your book that we have this information overwhelm, and we get paralyzed by analysis. So can you kind of dive into that, this information overwhelm, which I think we all know that there's so much out there, and we can just spend our entire lives just digging through it all. But how do you get someone to really weed through that to get them to the spot? Like if they have 13 projects going on, like what are some steps that you do?
Well, the first thing is to figure out what the longer term goal is, or the vision. We have a tool, we call it the master vision, and it helps a client describe and define what they want their life to look like a decade from now. So that's, as you can imagine, that's hard. I mean, it's supposed to be hard. You know, it's just, if I'm your track coach, I'm not going to help you at all if I have you run up 3 steps and come down again. But it's the demanding workouts that you feel exhausted after. So everything about today needs to be answered in light of where do you want to be down the road. And so if you're clear on the long term, and long term probably needs to be at least a decade. If you're clear on the long term, then it tends to reveal or expose what you should be doing in the short term. So there's a couple of ways that, sometimes you have too many projects and just intuitively, or too many action steps in a given day, and they all look like they're equally important. They're not, but determining which one is more important than the other requires a lot of mental energy. Yeah. So some people will either procrastinate, they'll kind of hit some resistance where it's kind of this invisible force that gives you all these rationalizations why you should do something else first. You should organize the office. You should
answer your
clean up
emails,
the database, charge your phone, return emails,
delete your junk
calls.
Delete your junk emails. That's what I do. I'm like, let me go delete like 50 emails.
But see, whenever you have that impulse to do it, it's kind of it's like that your unconscious is saying you're avoiding. So I've now, this is fairly recent, I've started to learn, whenever I face resistance, I know that I'm on the verge of a breakthrough, but the resistance is telling me to go the other direction, because the resistance, I don't believe is a God thing. The resistance is pushing us away from what's possible for us. Mm-hmm. So I like to use the phrase needle moving. So if you spend whatever you have to invest up front to figure out what are the few activities that really move the needle, that is time well spent, because it will guide you as to what to say yes to on when it comes to taking action. Sometimes when we're trying to figure out, what is the best resource here or the best resource here, or should I follow this goal setting plan, this strategic plan? Should I follow this plan for communicating with my spouse? And people part of this is good. They just are a sponge, mm-hmm. but they don't ever follow a process long enough to get the fruit, because they get attracted to the next shiny object or the next enticing email that comes in with a enticing offer to try something and do our system, and they tell you why all the other people is wrong. And the fact is, there's a lot of great ideas and methods that work, but none of them work unless you work. Mm-hmm. So if you dabble with something for 2 weeks and then you switch to something else and then you switch to something else, those are all, either one of those probably could have made a positive difference for you. But because you stopped and started, it's like planting a garden or something and then digging up and having to restart. And so you're losing time, and we really don't have time to lose.
Yeah. No, I love that. So we kind of have this information overwhelm, and we just kind of have this execution problem, because we're just kind of like that shiny objects. It's like, oh, this sounds good. This is going to get my dopamine up a little bit. Let me reach out and do that one. And I love what you've done, because you've done kind of the same business for 30 plus years, which is awesome. And you don't hear a lot about that. So it sounds like is that your personality? Like you're very steady, and you teach people to like get focused, run the long-term race. Let's finish well. Is that
Yeah,
like
I
kind of
mean,
your?
you know, I kind of, I didn't have a lot of life before starting this business, which is weird.
Yeah.
So I was coaching before I was married. I was actually coaching couples before I was married, not on how to have a great marriage, but just how to set goals as a couple.
Yeah.
And so I was steady from age 7 to age almost 21 on baseball. So maybe there is something to it. And we've reinvented the coaching practice, uh, 5, 6, 7 times in the last 30 years. But I think I'm more, Earl Nightingale used to say there's goal people and there's river people. And the river person, it appears at least from the outside that I'm more of a river person, and that I got in and then I'm flowing down the river to an end point. And then there's goal people who have a whole bunch of different and interesting goals that have nothing to do with each other that they've been pursuing. And there's nothing, one's not better than the other. They're just different. And so I've got a lot of clients that are goal people, and maybe I'm a river person, but I'll say I'm 55. I'll say that in the last 5, 7 years, I've tried to insert more random goals to just experience more of life, I didn't grow up doing outdoorsy stuff. So when I had kids and they got old enough to do cool things outside, I started them off doing it. And we were experiencing it together for the first time. And so what started as a silly little hike, half a mile up, half a mile down, ended up being, climbing Mount Rainier and Mount Shasta. And, years later, just kind of one step at a time, those things expanded.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think steady is good, but there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, I've done this for long enough. What do I do next? But you have to come back to that vision. Where do you want to be a decade from now? If you go to bed tonight with your life pretty darn good, I mean, everybody that's listening, there's probably a few million people that are better off than all of us, but we're better off than 5, 6 billion.
Yeah, for sure.
We all ought to go to bed feeling pretty terrific, but then imagine that overnight our life transforms into the best life possible that it can be a decade from now. What would that look like? And so I ask a variation of that question often, because it gets the client, it gets the individual out of the way. They don't have to think about, how am I going to make that life happen a decade from now? So you'll be married 20 years a decade from now. How old will your kids be? What's going on in your financial life? How will your fitness be at that point? Your health? Where will you be geographically located? What kind of margin will you have in your life? All those things, if you design it now, you can make sure that every step moves you in that direction. But most people get hung up in going, well, they'll start to write something cool that really inspires them, and they'll think, I don't know how to do it. And they won't finish the thought, or they'll cross it off. So I use that kind of dream, it happens overnight exercise to get the person out of the way. So don't think about how you do it. There'll be a time for that. Just first figure out what, because that stops well-intentioned people more than anything else, is lack of clarity about who they want to become and what they want to achieve.
Yeah. I love that. Just kind of that thought process. I love thinking, I love dreaming, and that's just kind of right down my lane there. You kind of go into this, you're obviously talking a lot about self-improvement, and that's, when you're talking about life, you want to improve these areas of your life, but you also say that there's dangers of kind of the self-help. Right? Back in 91, there might not have been a lot of self-help books and CDs and tapes, but now it's everywhere. And there can be a danger of getting addicted to self-help. So can you talk to us about, like, what are the dangers of people that, because everyone wants help and improvement, and but what are the dangers?
Yeah, well, the dangers are that there's kind of two big ones that I see. One is taking the advice or working with somebody or following somebody that you don't know enough about to be able to assess their credibility or where they're coming from, for example, on the spiritual side. Now, I think we can learn something from everybody. I think, we can learn from the worst example and the best example. You can always learn cool things from a wide variety of people. But it's almost like what I was talking to before about the information overload, is that if you don't settle on a particular process to follow in running your life or running your business, then you could be constantly shifting gears and not getting traction. So there's a lot of business systems to follow. There's a lot of goal setting systems to follow. There's a lot of strategic planning systems. And if you keep switching, you're not going to get the rewards of any one of them. And then you're going to wind up right where you got started. And so a lot of people have, I know this for a fact, they have, 100 books on personal growth, and 2 or 3 of them they've read. And the rest of them are just kind of a decoration, or they've read a chapter and then they got introduced to another book. Same thing with Audible. A lot of people, I think Audible, it'd be interesting if they would provide the stats for how many books are half listened to.
For sure.
Or a third listened to, or you download it out of enthusiasm and you never get around to it. So ultimately, if the danger is that you'll waste time. And when you waste time, you're wasting your life. And the bigger danger is that you might get enraptured with somebody that's going to lead you down the wrong path unless you have examined their track record and you want to have a life or a business like they have.
Yeah. No, I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. That's so good. You obviously talk a lot about joy in your books, and this renewing of your mind is kind of where it starts to have joy in your life. And how do you just continuously have joy day in and day out, especially in today's type of culture, especially what we've seen in the last couple of years, whether it's the news or the politics or the hate, people are throwing around, or just the misery, the mental health of our, world, the pandemic. How have you maintained?
Current affairs are a mess,
Yeah.
And so right off the bat, you have to recognize that. And so joy, I distinguish it from happiness. All of us want both. But joy is kind of the steady happiness, or proactive happiness. If I have a good time with my wife tonight, if I get to go have a fun experience this weekend at a football game, if we have a great trip, a good meal, those things are all going to make me happy. But joy is different. Joy is about how you process what's going on around you, where your focal point is. In other words, are you focusing on what's lovely, pure, true, gracious, and just, as it lays out in Philippians 4:8, or are you focused on what's missing, deficient, and defective? And there's always going to be a mixed bag. So it's real easy for nice people, well-meaning people, to drift, and that's usually how it happens. They drift gradually out of shape.
Yeah.
Gradually, their marriage is a mess. Gradually, they're in a financial hole. And then suddenly, it's a big problem. So it's gradually, and then suddenly. I think that's a line out of from Hemingway, I believe, but it's a very powerful line, and that it explains why we don't address problems. Because if we have a cheeseburger and fries tonight, we're not going to be 5 pounds or 10 pounds overweight tomorrow.
For sure.
We're just going to be a little bit over. But then over time, people look at clothes in their closet and go, oh my gosh, how did I ever fit into these clothes? Or when they lose weight again, they'll go back and they'll look at the big clothes and they'll go, oh, that's so embarrassing that I got that big. So when it comes to joy is a line in the sand, a mental line in the sand that you have to draw. And if you can't discipline your thinking to focus on your blessings and the goodness around you, even in an adversity, then you're not going to have joy. And so if you're in the middle of an adversity, some kind of trouble and hardship, and I like to joke, and I mean this in a nice way, that we're either just coming out of some adversity, we're in the middle of adversity, or we're just about to head into adversity. So if you cannot learn how to stay joyful in the midst of adversity, you're not going to have joy in life. And how do we practice joy? We have to insulate ourselves from that cultural noise. The repeated messaging from society, particularly in the news, but news and social media, often from people who don't share our values. So the most tactical way to do this is to get up in the morning and to plan the first 15 minutes to 90 minutes to where you are completely getting your mindset focused on the right things, the things you're grateful for, the things you'd hate to wake up tomorrow without, the people you love, the exciting things you're looking forward to, the contribution you want to make, your high priorities in your work life, how you're going to love on your spouse, despite the fact that he or she didn't reciprocate last time, and so on. And you get your mind right, then you get your body right, you get your spirit right with the devotion, reading the Bible, prayer, praise, and you do those things, no pun intended, religiously every single morning. It's spiritual, directional, which is focus, mental, and then it's physical, doing something physical, even if it's not your full workout for the day. So you do that, then you fast forward to the evening and you bookend. So you wake up proactively, you decide what your first thought of the day is. It could be something generic, like I believe something wonderful is going to happen to me today, or it could be something spiritual, like this is the day which the Lord hath made, I shall rejoice and be glad in it, or whatever you want. But don't wake up and go, I'll let the dog or my spouse or the radio or some, whatever social media dictate what the first thought is. Decide that in advance, and then protect yourself on an ongoing basis with what we call positive mental nutrition. So, which is putting wholesome, inspiring, motivating, educational ideas into your mind on a regular basis, particularly finding a resource, whether it's the 4-8 principle, some other book, a podcast you love, and repeated ingestion. It's kind of like if we believe that, having grilled chicken, broccoli is a decent meal, some olive oil on the broccoli, let's say,
sounds good.
Then you don't just have that once. And so if there is a short passage, I read things over and over again, and I listen to the same book. There's a book I was listening to today, earlier in the morning. I'm probably on my 17th or 18th listen of it. And it's just kind of a random book, but it's about taking action and overcoming resistance. And then I will sometimes go back and listen to some of my own books. And then I have my favorites, and I have podcasts. But I'm always pushing, and our clients are required to tell us each week, what are they going to listen to? What are they going to read? What are they going to surf? How much TV do they have planned? And we're not telling them what they should watch or not watch. We're just saying, hey, have a plan.
Yeah.
Don't just turn on Netflix and flip through it, and then all of a sudden 3 hours have gone by. But if you want to plan 3 hours, it's just most people that would have any interest in being proactive at all or growth, they would catch on that that's kind of a method to slow down being reactive or randomness. So, hey, watch 3 hours of Netflix if you want, but plan it. Have a cheat meal if you want, but plan it. And so there's a great matchup with what we ingest physically and what we ingest mentally. I don't think you can watch the news every night and maintain the joy at the level that our Creator wants it. And I love politics. I don't love it, but I love debating and discussing, and I have some strong convictions on what I think is right and wrong. and I think politics is really the fight for what a nation or a community values. So I like it from that standpoint, but gosh, I just can't take it in too much.
Yeah.
So I have to budget it and not exceed the budget, get the minimum effective dose, if you will, of current affairs so I can know what to pray about. I can be well informed. I can stand up for what I believe in, but not too much, which then overwhelms my system and could start to make you cynical, where you're seeing everything through that lens, which we have, unfortunately, very little control over.
Yeah. I love what you said, on rereading or retaking in the information. I think so many times we just get in that mode of we listen to something, we can't listen to that again because we already have. Let's listen to something new. Let's read 60 books in a year. Which, most CEOs, they say read all these books, but I love, what you said about your 17th time reading that book. And just getting that habit, like, man, if I have a book that really like transformed my mind, I want to read that again and again and again. Like I'll get something different, just like the Bible, right? You read it again and again and again. So
let me tell you, there's that just makes me think of something like there's two benefits to positive mental nutrition. One is the information. Okay, wow, I learned something new that I didn't know. But the bigger one is it changes your mindset. So let's take a book on marriage, Love and Respect. Emerson Eggerichs. There's actually seeing if I had it laying around in here, there's actually a shorter version that is like a devotional. Maybe it's called the Love and Respect Experience. Anyway, it's the better of the two because it's real easy to read. So let's imagine that you had mastered all of the 50 or 52 chapters of this book and you knew it in and out. You could teach a love and respect course. Well, it would still be valuable to you to listen to that book or read a few chapters before you went home in the evening or on your way home if you were listening to it in the car. I mean, do you think you would be a more kind, caring, connected husband or wife if you listened to a marriage podcast on the way home?
Yeah.
Of course. What if, do you have to learn something new to be better? No, you just have to have those impressions. Same thing with, what if you listen to a fitness and health podcast on the way home?
You'd be healthy.
Well, I mean, you're far more likely to make better food choices. So there's the information, which is more intellectual. Then there's the consciousness. In other words, wow, I'm very mindful of what I'm saying to my wife, or I'm very conscious about how I'm interacting with my kids, or wow, I'm really aware that I'm eating because I'm bored, not because I'm actually needing calories. Right. That kind of thing.
Yeah. No, I love that. That's awesome, Tommy. Well, thank you so much again. And I know that, you have the book, the 4A Principle, guys. Make sure you check that out, The Secret to a Joy-Filled Life. And you also have this program, Tommy. I want to kind of hit on that again. It's called the Super Focus Program. You've done a lot of coaching. We've actually put that into an online series as well. So can you kind of tell our audience about that?
Yeah, the Super Focus Program is an online coaching program for Christian leaders and entrepreneurs, and it's a process. So it addresses a little bit of what we talked about, in that people jump around to their resource for goal setting, for time management, for problem solving, for mental discipline, and we have become a one-stop shop. In other words, if you trust us and you like our track record and where we're coming from philosophically, then you can join Super Focus, and month after month, we will expose you sequentially to a thought out curriculum of courses and in order to stay focused. And then we teach you a process for how to run your mornings, your evenings, and your weeks. Those three things, mornings, evenings, and weeks. It's a simple process, 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes at night, 10 minutes at the end of the week. And there's that process. And then once a month, we do something like this where we're on live and we coach everybody by looking backwards. We say, hey, what worked well in the last month? What didn't? What are we going to change? I ask a bunch of questions, answer everybody's questions, do a little bit of teaching, but it's the live coaching. So that's different than a book, and the book still gets you the information, let's say. But the coaching and Super Focus gets you immersed. It gets you into action. It gets you to take ownership of what you're trying to do in your life. And then we come alongside people, particularly those that are independent contractors, that are entrepreneurs, small business owners, who need that outside presence because they're the top of the pack, and they need somebody that'll hold them accountable and push them to go beyond where they've previously gone as a spouse, parent, in their fitness and in their faith, and especially, in their finances. The key point is we want to take people to the next level financially, but without having them screw up their faith, their family, and their health. That's kind of our mission overall, but it's the driving force behind the Super Focus program as well.
Yeah. Love that. And they can get that on your website, right? TommyNewberry.com?
That's right.
Cool.
Yep. And the books are available at Amazon or as they say, any other place where good books are sold.
Sounds good. We're going to put that in our show notes on our YouTube channel too, guys. So make sure you check that out and check out TommyNewberry.com to check out the course, and you can get the books on there as well, or Amazon. So thanks so much, Tommy, for being on the show today. Appreciate you, buddy. So much great wisdom, and now we just have to go and execute, right?
That's right. That's the easy part.
That's right.
I wish. Thank you, Brett.
Thanks, Tommy.